Now, here's the old building, right here. And what we did was we stepped back 4 inches. That was my idea, because if you ever try to match a building, it's going to look like a sore thumb. You always step it back 4 inches. But over here, since it's overlapping the top of the building, and we got to go way up there to the top, see the top? We had to extend the building over here. But I don't want it laying on this building, because this building moves and this building moves. So we get an angle iron. Angle iron goes through. The old timers would corbel it out, and then I'm going to put one this way and put one this way, and then take my line and shoot it up. But under here I got maybe 3 inches. Code says 2 inches, because when they come under here and they put the flashing, they got to have something to get the flashing underneath. I just want to point that all out. I hope you understand that. But that's the extension. On the old timers, they would corbel it out. They go that way, and they go this way. They keep corbling it out like you see in those old castles and everything. Now we're back at this armory. I'm going to get up there a little closer, right up in there, and see how they corbeled that brick out. I'm going to talk about that now. Now this is my little architecture rule. You can see the degrees here if you could see them. There's 10, there's 20, there's 30 degrees. So when we want to see how much degrees they went out there on that corbelling, I estimated it between 15 and 20 degrees. So that's how you do that, just by looking at it. And then you go over here in the corbel, right there. They're not out a whole lot. I'd say right from where I'm at, 3/4 of an inch to an inch, all the way to the top. You notice they put blue stone over the arches, and when they got on the top up there, they put those blue stone caps. So that's what keeps the water from. But you can see what happens to brickwork after years. It just kind of dissipates. And even the stone they used here, this is Pennsylvania stone. 100 years, a lot better than what they build buildings now. I just wanted to make that point. So I set this little corbel thing out for a show and tell, kind of see how it works. New school, they use angle irons. And what I did was I shoved the angle iron out, and then I came up to wherever I wanted it to be. I know by a rule of thumb that at this angle, 20 degrees or 15 degrees or whatever, it was going to hold up that whole thing by itself. But new school, you have the angle irons. That's the way you do it. I'd say this lasted until about the 20s or the 30s. If you didn't use an arch, you'd corbel it out. If you look at those old buildings from the Western movies or from the 20s, they had the designs on top of the building. That's what they did. They corbeled it out. And just like the old castles, they would do that to save material. And they'd come up, and then they'd build their thing where they could shoot their arrows down and everything. I would say a rule of thumb is you have to have more weight this way than this way. But once they invented gunpowder, the day of the old castles were over with. But this is corbelling. It's an inch out. Usually they say 1/3 of a brick at the most. So if a brick is 3 inches, 3 1/4 inches, about an inch every time. And that's the way you do it. Another rule of thumb in masonry is if it's going to stay there when there's no cement, it should stay there when you cement it. So I just wanted to point that out. And now I'm going to continue with the angle iron. But you can see in a lot of old buildings, when you see a crack, they don't always go straight up. They always go to that angle. So when you look at old buildings, you see big cracks. Look for that angle, because once it's supported over here, cracks usually go this way. So all this is doing is holding it up temporary until it dries. Putting our wall ties in as we go. I got a couple courses on. I got this door wall, piece of door wall wire. It goes over and it'll connect onto the other brick. Just something else to hold it on. Keep your wall ties. If they ever come up here and bump it, I want to make sure it's going to stay there. Now, I'm going to go right on top of that wire just like that. got this here fancy, forget what they call that already. Okay, we put this on here. Now we're just going to go with this line holder thing. We got our corner in though. It's going to support itself. Now that's that little offset I put on. You see what I did here? I hung that out like that. So that's what I ended up, that's what that looks like when it's finished. I want to mention one more thing about brick. See this brick? It's got a big banana in it. If you look down there, that ain't straight as all. Look at this one, how bad this one is. So when you're getting brick and you're laying them like that, you're going to have a hole. If you lay the two of them like this, you're going to have a big joint. You're going to have a big joint in the middle and little joints at the end. So the policy is if you get a bump in the brick, you always put the bump to the top. And then that's what helps you with the brick. But bricks ain't all the same. So you're going to get little joints, you're going to get big joints. It's just the nature of the beast. You gotta kind of adjust it to make it look good. Now this is an extreme, but I'm just giving you an example. Right here is a little vent for a sewer line, and I'm not actually going to cement it in. What I'm going to use is this seal stuff, and I'm just going to wrap it around there. Wrap it around like that, and then lay my brick around it like this. Now, I'd cement the whole thing in, but if they ever had to pull that pipe out, and if they ever had this thing moves, brickwork moves, so it's just something that I like to do. Then you could cock it around here if you want to, but it just gives a little play. So that's that. I'll put some caulking around that later on and that'll be all done. I have this one. What I do, just like if I'm building a fireplace, you always put some insulation. It's just fiberglass insulation. This way if it ever gets replaced, the guy won't come out here and curse me. See, everything gets covered. That's my policy, and then if he ever has to change it, it'll be easy for him to change it. So you got to be considerate to the next guy. And we just put the plate back and we're done. Okay, we're way up on the top, and this is gonna get if you look back, it's gonna get a flashing that goes down over the top, and it's gonna be down here about 6-7 inches, maybe 5 inches. I forget what the guy told me, but we only got so far to go. So usually in a job like this, we would actually use a roll lock like that, and then we lay the roll lock all the way. We're not going to do that though. We're just going to lay it down and tuck the top. So what I'm doing the top brick, what I do is I fill the holes like that, and then sun's in the way. I get it up there, that brick is filled. That's my last course. So for the top, I'm just tucking it, that's all, so the birds and the bees and everything don't get up in there. Just like that. Making a mess out of it, but we're going to wash it tomorrow. Now I'm back here at my sample again. And if you ever looked at some old buildings, look at the courthouses, look at the churches, they always have a water table. And it's usually made out of granite. And I did a video, it's called Building Stones and Their Uses Part 5, Granite. And those old buildings, they would put the granite down, and that's because when the water splashes, it goes against the brick, it freezes in the winter, and it knocks the whole thing apart. And I'm going to show you that a little later on some modern buildings around here. So we're going to go back over to Europe a little bit, and we're going to look at their buildings, because They have buildings that last for hundreds and hundreds of years, and you don't see it much in America. It kind of fall away. I don't have a piece of granite to show you, but let me show you some of that video, and you'll see what the point I'm getting at. This is a good example of what masons call a water table. Usually from 30 inches down, they usually use granite, and then they start with the limestone or brick, because as the water splashes, it doesn't ruin the granite. Granite is a real hard stone. It don't really take the water in like limestone or brick. So this is an example of a water table. You usually see it on banks, you see it on churches or government buildings, because that's usually the only places that they could afford it. Okay, here we are in the building. This is all granite too. This is in Copenhagen. This is a water table, we call it. Now here we are on the bottom of a brick building, and this is granite. You see it? Oh, they do that, and then the rest of the building would be brick. Now we're at the church in Roskilde, Denmark, and this of course is the cobblestone, and here we have granite. And granite is always the water table, because when the water hits it, it splashes again, it doesn't hurt it. But one of the things to notice is most of the brick in Denmark has a glass type of finish to it. So the brick masons, they don't really joint their brick up much. They just get a sponge and they sponge over it, and that's how they sponge their brick off. That's the way they do it here in Denmark. I think that's a smart idea. Now you don't really see water tables in modern brickwork anymore, because they don't build buildings to last 300-400 years. One of the biggest reasons I don't use brick on steps where I live in northeastern Pennsylvania is the weather kills them. I usually use a stone that goes across because the weather kills them. It's another reason, I'm going to get to the point, is what kind of cement I use. And for the brick I use, the cement I used S-mortar, which is mortar that contains Portland. When I was a kid, we used to mix 20 shovels of sand, which was 4 buckets, a bag of mortar, and 3 shovels of Portland. Because if we didn't add Portland to it, all the cement would fall out of the joints. It's just the way it is around here. In Arizona and Florida, it's a whole different world, but around here, every mason I talk to uses S-mortar. So let's go look at some buildings where they didn't use S-mortar. I'm going to show you exactly what happens, and you'll see why every part of the country you use different building techniques and different types of cement. So here we go with that. Now here's an old brick building. Here's what happens when buildings, see what happens, how it all deteriorates on the bottom? Here's another example of a building, what happens to the brickwork. See, it's all good up there, but down where the water table is, it all falls apart. Now here's a perfect example why I don't use end mortar in Pennsylvania. See how the joints are good up here? When you get down here, right where the sidewalk is, and the bricks actually fall apart. That's typical in Pennsylvania. Old school, they put a water table. So I'm going to try to explain the cement I use in that job and what goes on with cement with brickwork. In the old days, 17th century, 18th century, up until about the 19th century, everything was built out of mortar, which was basically lime. Depends on what you want to call it. And then they invented Portland. Now in the old days when they had mortar, the only thing you'd see sidewalks out of was cobblestone, and the roads were cobblestone because they had no Portland to hold up. When they invented Portland, now you're building bridges, now you're building swimming pools, now you're doing sidewalks and you're doing roads because of the Portland cement. It's much, much stronger. So when I was growing up, and I was working in the 60s and the 70s, we would use the mortar cement and we would add Portland to it as an ingredient. And the mix for block and brick was always 4 buckets of sand, 2 buckets of mortar, and 3 shovels of Portland, which was a little more than 2 to 1, but it held up. If you don't use the Portland and you don't have water tables, it's going to fall apart. I already showed you it. I could show you hundreds of examples of what happens. So the masons who knew what they were doing would use mortar, and they'd add a Portland to it, just like you're making spaghetti sauce or something, to what they needed it for. Then someone realized that down the road that that's what the Masons were doing, so they got this word, Mason work. And I got to thank the guy that sent me this information over the internet, because I didn't even know that. And they used M-A-S-O-N-W-O-R-K, and they took every second letter, M-S-N-O-K, and they made the different types of cement, M-S-N-O-K. And all they did was take regular mortar and add Portland to it. So if you get type K, it's 100% lime or mortar. If you get type O, it's 33% Portland, 60%, 7% lime. Type N is 50-50. Type S is 67 to 33. And type N is basically pure Portland. So that's why everybody's so confused and everything. I don't know why they did that. It's very confusing. Trying to simplify it. So when I did the brickwork, I used 2 buckets of Mason sand to 1 bucket of S mortar. And if I thought I needed more Portland, I would have added. Now I walked around that whole complex and the whole building, and they used lime and they used Portland, which was basically 50-50, and probably 2 sand, and there wasn't one joint out of place. They didn't have to fix anything. So I asked every Mason in town and in the area what they use in northeastern Pennsylvania, and what they use is S mortar and Mason sand, 2 to 1. Never have a problem. Now I want to go a little farther with the cement. This is the kind of cement I was using on that job down there. Put it on, put that on there like that, even though it's backwards. This is old school. This is what I showed you when they're doing the building with the arches and the one that was falling down and the bonding and everything. I use this cement, put that on there, put this on here like that. This is fire brick. This is the same stuff you use on your fireplace. Take this, put this together like that, put that like that. Now, just want to show you something. See, this is still real time. This is wet as a hoot owl. See it? Move it around. This is dry already. See it? It's dry. Why is that? Because that brick will accept water. It sucks the water in. That's why some guys will say, oh, you can only use mortar for this kind of brick, because if this is too hard, this is going to make this fall apart. Well, it's a water brick. What do you expect? I still don't trust regular mortar in it. I still use S mortar in it, but that's my opinion. This, same thing. That should have dried a little faster than I thought, but it's the same thing. It's dry already because it accepts water. Any kind of brick like that accepts water is good. This kind of brick doesn't accept water. See that? That's wet as a hoot owl. So that's why that brick was so dirty. That's why this brick was so clean. This brick is still drying a little bit, but you get the picture. So you got to know what kind of brick you're using, and how fast it'll absorb the water, and what it'll do before you choose what type of cement to use. So sometimes, see how that dried up pretty good? That's about 3 minutes later. See how that dried up? It's still wet. So to me, being me, why would you want to use a brick like this that's going to absorb water and fall apart, and then complain about what you're going to point it up with? Throw the brick away, get a good solid brick, and that's the end of it. That's my opinion. All this stuff is my opinion, the way I look at things, and I'm just sharing it with you. Now we're washing the building down with acid. I already did that video. It's cleaning brick and masonry with acid. So you could just go that and watch that by yourself. Okay, we're back here with Honest Mark. He's the electrician, expert in the migration of geese. Mark, why does the geese fly south in the winter?
It's too far to walk.
Okay. We're in Roskilde, Denmark, and a lot of the buildings are built out of brick because they always had a problem getting wood. But you go over here, and you can see right here where the brickwork is. And on the bottom of the brickwork, they usually put granite, or what we call a water table. Well, right here, they patched it. You see that? So one of the things I want you to notice is this is a glass type of face brick. And all they did was they put the cement in and they sponged it. And because it's kind of glass, it doesn't kind of stick. I think that's genius. It's my opinion, there's no right or wrong way to do brickwork. But my opinion is I'm a big fan of that. Now this Danish house is like 400 years old. And right here on the bottom, all they did was lay some stones. And they built a frame out of wood, just like this. And then they just laid bricks between it. And that's basically a real Tudor house. So that's the end of my little series on how I do brickwork, part 5. And I ended up with that little Tudor house because it's been there for 400 years. It was built small, it was built easy to fix. There's a lot of different ways to look at it. Brickwork isn't black and white. And what they do in Florida won't work in Pennsylvania, and what works in Pennsylvania won't work in Southern California, and what works in Southern California won't work in Alaska. So different materials for different places, different cements, and different techniques of how to build. I do what works around here. So that's the end of the series. Thanks for watching. I have a lot of other brick videos that kind of revolve around this. So we'll see you again next video.